I'm so thankful that you are here today. If we've not had a chance to meet, my name is Mark. I have the privilege of serving as the lead pastor here, New Collective Church. And today is week 4 of a series that I've been calling the 5 Principles of Relationships. How many of you have been here or listened to the first 3 of these? A little poll. Yeah, a good number of you have. And no worries if you have not. And certainly welcome if today is your first day here with us, or your first day joining us online. So what I want to do today, then, just to bring us all onto the same page and to catch us all up, is a brief recap here momentarily for us today. As I shared in the beginning of this series, what I have done is I have looked to simplify and to synthesize down to a few words the state of relationships in the 2020s and in the lives of individuals in which I've had the chance to meet with over the course of the last 20 years or so of pastoral ministry. And here are the words that I have come to be able to describe the state of relationships. It's these words: distant, divided, dysfunctional, devour, and devastation. Stay distant. People are bad for you. They're scary. They're dangerous. Be divided. It's really fun to be angry, irritated, pick a side. Dysfunctional is amazing. It's really fun if your story is the most dysfunctional story in the room. Dysfunctional. And the great commandment of the modern era of relationships: devour one another, because people are here to be at your disposal for you to be able to gain from them, not to ever serve them or to be helpful to them. That's sarcasm, by the way. This is not what you should do, just to make sure. I just like to, because everybody gets real nervous sometimes. Like, I don't know what kind of church this is that I came to today. And what we have noticed is that this all leads us to a place of devastation, to prisons of devastation and ongoing patterns of relational devastation. So I have merely proposed to us in this series, why not better? And why not step into a relationship revolution in which we can live a life at its fullest potential relationally? That we can live a life that is free from this prison and these patterns of devastation. And so far, here are the first 3 principles in recap for us. Here are these first 3. Honor is due. Everyone is worthy of honor. We should honor everyone because every person is created in the image of God. Love is the greatest commandment. We are to love God and we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. And last week we saw the principle of forgiveness. That not if, but when people fail you, forgiveness is a given. For followers of Jesus, we forgive as God has forgiven us. Now, all of this is relatively generic until today. All of this is relatively basic until today. Not easy, but basic. Because it applies largely to the general population. But today we're going to get into the 4th principle, which is as unique as every person that you know. It is a principle that is so practical, you can apply it to the person who's sitting next to you, and you can apply it to the person that you work with, and you can apply it to the people that you do not like. You can apply it in every set of circumstances that you're in, and you should. The 4th principle of relationships is trust. Is trust. The 4th principle of biblical relationships is trust. Because I guarantee you that last week, as I am preaching this sermon about forgiveness, that many of you were at a place and point of saying, okay, I can forgive them, but I'm not sure about my relationship with them moving forward. What does it look like? Should it be the same? Should it be different? How is it that I can actually move forward in these relationships? This is what I mean when I'm talking about trust. Because it is possible for you to honor someone, hear me, it's possible for you to honor someone, love someone, and even forgive someone, but not fully trust someone. This is why this is important. And in fact, again, this is the place of tension when people sit down with me to have conversations about relationships and things that have happened, and they often get those two terms confused, forgiveness and trust. Forgiveness is not trust, and trust is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is a given, but trust is something else entirely. So, let's look at a few markers for trustworthiness. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 11. Two particular verses in Proverbs chapter 11 in regards to trust. Proverbs 11 verse 3 is the first one. The integrity of the upright guides them. The upright is the trustworthy. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity, their double-mindedness. Proverbs 11 verse 3 paints a very clear picture here of a couple different types of people. The upright who is trustworthy because they are following the moral standard, codes, and compass of the Word of God. Their integrity, they are the same in every situation. Not perfect, but they are striving towards something. And those who are filled with duplicity. And it warns us that there are people who are going to be destroyed by their duplicity, destroyed by their double-mindedness, destroyed by their living two different types of lives. And then a few verses later, more clarity on the subject of trustworthiness. Proverbs 11 verse 13. A gossip betrays a confidence, but a trustworthy person keeps a secret. A gossip. In other words, a person that you have shared stuff with, but they could not hold it. They could not keep it in confidence. This is also a broader illustration for a person in which they are not trustworthy in any kind of situation. You would not want to be stuck with them in a moment of suffering or in a moment of difficulty, because you can't put your confidence in them to do the right thing or say the right thing. At the first sign of opportunity to be able to sell you out, they're going to sell you out. This is the gossip who betrays a confidence. But a trustworthy person keeps a secret. They've got your back. They're there for you. They're not looking to devour you at the first opportunity to be able to take advantage of you. These are some definitive markers of trustworthiness. What Proverbs 11 does is paint a really black and white kind of picture, though, of trust. Don't trust this person. They lie, they cheat, they gossip. It's pretty easy. Okay, I think we're all there. I think that's so baseline. We're like, yeah, I should not trust that person. And I think that we're all in a pretty good place when we have someone who is always there for us, who we can place our confidence in, that we should probably lean into those relationships more than the other ones. I think we're all there. But what I also think is, in this room, we could all testify, it's not that simple, is it? It's not always that clear. People don't show up in your life with a name tag on that says, hey, I live a double life. You should not trust me. And people don't show up in your life with all of their proven track record of what they've been able to hold and what they've been able to carry and how they've shown up for people all along the way. It doesn't work like that, does it? In fact, trust has a nuance to it that I'm convinced this is one of the reasons why we struggle with it so much, is because there's people that come to your mind right now and you're thinking things like, should I trust them? Can I trust them? Can I trust them again? If I were to trust them again, what would that even mean? What would that even look like? See, there's a nuance to it. And this is the most powerful thing in regards to trust for us to be able to acknowledge. Before you just throw in the towel altogether and say, I can't trust you ever again. I can't trust that person ever again. Before you simply come to a place of cynicism like the entire world around you and say, don't trust anyone. Before we do that, or before we run blindly out into the meadow like Bambi, thinking that nothing bad could ever happen to me. Let's talk about the nuance of trust. All right, let's go to the big screen. Big screen. Trust can be eroded or earned. This is a part of the nuance of trust. Trust can be eroded or earned. In other words, it can be diminished, decreased, in decline, erode away, or it can be earned or earned back. It can be built and it can be built again. But we need an understanding of how these things happen and how I can move forward in regards to it. Trust can be eroded. You know, the OG story in regards to trust being eroded in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 3. God had placed Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden in a perfect place of peace and harmony. But as you know, there is one tree that is at the middle of the garden. And God says, you can eat of all of the trees in the garden except this one tree. Why does God do that? Why does God have one tree that is in the middle of the garden that he would say, this tree is off limits, this tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Why not just eliminate all possibility of there being such a tree? Because God is a God of love, and you can't have a loving relationship if there is not an opportunity for trust. For trust. You can't have trust if there's not an opportunity for distrust. So he places this tree in the middle of the garden, and what happens in Genesis chapter 3? The snake slithers along. I'm not sure why it's a snake. I would have gone for a cat, honestly, if I'm looking for a demonic force that shows up in my life regularly. There's very few snakes in my house, but there is one cat. Now, granted, I let it in, so we can, question my own integrity and duplicity. Wisdom, all of those. Feel free to question all of it. I'm fine with that. I question it every day, honestly. I would have probably gone for a cat, but it's a snake. The devil shows up in this serpent character, doing what? Tempting Eve to take from the tree in the middle of the garden. And she looks at it and she sees that it looks good for food, and she takes it and she eats, and she gives some to her husband Adam, and they both eat, and you know the story. They ruin the entire universe. And that's what we all do. But let's break that down a little bit more. Trust can be eroded. What happens in this story? Trust can be eroded by apathy. By apathy. What do you mean by apathy? I mean that in that garden, when Eve is talking to a snake, which is always a bad sign. When you see your partner talking to a snake, maybe show up and intervene in the situation, Adam. While he's standing off to the side thinking, never seen this before. This is new. Who is Eve talking to? I thought it was just us here. I know she talks to herself sometimes, but this doesn't seem like she's just by herself. She's certainly not praying. She's talking to a snake. Trust sometimes gets eroded, friends, not because you're doing something terribly wrong. It's because you're not doing anything at all. Sometimes in our relationships with people, trust is being eroded in inactivity. Trust is being eroded in complacency. Trust is being eroded because someone is in a moment of temptation or a moment of difficulty, and you're not there for them. And fellas, I think it's pretty clear that Adam's very culpable in this first moment and first scene, because he's just watching He's not showing up. He's just viewing Eve in a moment of temptation and struggle. And he hangs her out to dry. Trust is eroded in the midst of apathy. Engage in your marriage. Engage in your relationships with your kids. Engage, be intentional, show up and be present. Trust is also eroded through exaggeration. Exaggeration. One of the things that happens, this is one of the most subtle of all of them, but it's very clear in that story in Genesis chapter 3. When the serpent shows up, the serpent questions, did God really say that you can't eat of any of the trees of the garden? That's the opposite, right? What an exaggeration. Did God really say you can't eat food? Did God just set you in this place to starve you to death? Like he created you and then he just said nothing for you? And said what God had said, you can have all of these trees with the exception of this one. All of this except this one thing. So the serpent shows up with exaggeration. And then when Eve engages with the serpent in conversation, she says, no, God didn't say that, but he says this, and he says that if you eat from it or even touch it, which was another exaggeration. God didn't say anything about touching it, he said something about eating it. What's the point here in all of this dialogue? The point in this dialogue is that exaggeration, albeit subtle sometimes, is eroding trust. The serpent meant for that exaggeration to erode Eve's trust in God. Eve begins to exaggerate because she wants to justify what it is that she is about to do that is wrong. There's so many people that I have had relationships with in my life that are phenomenal people, very talented and very gifted, but trust is eroded because they just simply can't tell a story without exaggeration in it. This is why I say you have to be really careful when you find a pattern in yourself or within others that's always prone to exaggeration. Now, I'm a pastor, so I have been around a lot of pastors, and I know that pastors are as prone to exaggerate as any people on the planet, especially when we all get together at like one conference or event. Because why? Because everybody asks, how many people attend your church? And I've been around a lot of guys that I actually knew and preached in their churches, and I hear their number and I'm like, must have been a bad day when I came. Because I haven't seen 1,000 people at your place in years. And I've been there multiple times. In fact, there was one church culture in which I was in, and I was talking with a guy who worked there, and it was a multi-site church, and so they had multiple locations, and they would occasionally send people from one location to the next to be able to see the things that were working well so they could learn from one another. And he'd been looking at a report of numbers week after week after week, and he showed up at a place with huge numbers on paper to witness a much smaller number of people being present, and then saw the report that week that had a much higher number than what was actually present in the room. What do you think happened to that culture? Terrible things. Trust was eroded, and no matter how much a person got up with a microphone and said, trust one another, lead with trust, believe the best in one another. Do you think any of that meant anything to the people? No. And the same thing is true in our lives when we exaggerate over and over again. Trust is eroded. And also, this is quite obvious, deception also erodes trust. Deception. Outright lies, for sure, is a great way to be able to destroy trust that you have in a relationship. Apathy, exaggeration, and look at this next one, shame. Because what you feel after those first three is what Adam and Eve felt when they are in the garden and they suddenly realize we are naked, we are exposed. We have been found out, basically. We have found out something about ourselves that we did not want to see. We have been found out by one another. And also we will be found out by God. Shame begins to erode trust. And then they did what is the icing on the cake in the erosion of distrust, which is blame. Blame. In the erosion of trust, this always seals the deal. What happened? When God shows up and begins speaking to Adam and Eve, what do they do? What do? Adam says, the woman you gave me brought me this fruit. What am I supposed to do? Say no? What am I supposed to do? Turn down dinner? He doesn't say those things, but he's like, the woman you gave me. And then what happens when God has the conversation with Eve? The serpent who came along was all crafty and tempted me and said, what happened? Blame. And whenever you are in a situation in which you do not take any responsibility for your own actions, you will continue to see trust eroded. Now, let's go to the flip side of this. I'll go through this more quickly because this is the solution to this. How we earn trust is with integrity. With integrity. That we actually have a moral standard based on the Word of God. If you're a follower of Jesus, is where you should get this from, where you're not a person of double-mindedness or duplicity. Not as though that you are perfect, but you live a life that has a clear direction in following Jesus. A life of integrity and a life of honesty. Honesty, especially in moments when it becomes realized, oh, wait a second, I made a mistake here. You know, the most powerful way to recover from a mistake is to be honest about it. It's like, you know what? I missed that one. I didn't come through on that. Let me be honest. And in fact, let's be people of transparency. Transparency. Before anything even goes wrong, you're being real and honest and authentic about, here's what I think, here's how I feel. This is what I would like. It builds trust. If you are in a marriage relationship, very few things builds trust or helps you earn trust like transparency. When you can just be honest about, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm thinking through. Imagine this. Imagine a marriage in which you actually said, I'm being tempted in a lustful manner before you had the affair and the adultery and blew up the whole thing. But it's like, I can't do that. I can't say something like that to someone. I can't actually be that transparent with my spouse about my struggle. Why? Well, they would get angry if they knew the way that I really felt. They would be upset. Yes, not if we all actually begin to build trust with one another and it becomes common for us to share our struggle before it becomes our prison. It's transparency. It's transparency. And also out of this is reliability. Reliability. Reliability helps you earn trust when you are a reliable person, when you're not a person of apathy, but you are showing up for the people in your life. You earn trust. And the last one is ownership. Yes, when you take ownership for, this is my part. This is my part in our problems. This is my part in this situation. This is my part in this relationship. When you own your part, you can actually earn trust. Now, if you want to take your phone out and take a photo of this, you can. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, no. This is how trust can be eroded or earned. Now, what I said earlier in terms of trust, there's a nuance to it. What I'm about to show you, I think, is one of the most powerful things that I've discovered in regards to trust and relationships with people, is that trust has levels and layers. Trust has levels and layers. This is the nuance of it. Levels involves going up and down in the trustworthiness of a person. Layers involve some unique factors of each individual. I want to talk through this. Trust has levels. What contributes to the levels of trustworthiness? Character. Character. A person with integrity and good character, following the standards set forth in the scriptures, this is a person who is trustworthy at a high level. Character. Also, the next part is credibility. Their knowledge, their experience, their wisdom. This is a factor in the level of someone's trustworthiness. Are they credible? Are the things that they are saying true? Have they spent time, energy, and effort in their discovery of truth? Have they spent time working at their craft? Are they credible? Are they credible? And the third part of levels is consistency. Consistency. Is their yes a yes and their no a no? This affects the level. The level. Are you with me? Makes sense so far? This affects the level. So again, this is why you can't just merely say, if someone asks, do you trust me? I just don't feel like you trust me. You should trust me. Okay. Well, one, if they're yelling at you like that, you probably shouldn't. It's already a bad sign. All right. I've had people act like that before. I've seen a lot of things along the way. You should trust me with this. I just don't feel like you trust me. Well, okay, let's talk about your character, your credibility, and your consistency. I might trust you at a certain level, and I might also distrust you at a certain level. There's levels, but there's also layers, and this is a really important factor in regards to trust. There's layers, which involves competency. Competency. Let me give you an example of that. You might trust me at a certain level. Like you want to trust me for sure at a very high level. I'm a pastor. You want to trust me that my character, my credibility, and consistency is there. But I would also submit to you, there's some things you should not trust me with. Like, you should not trust me to install a tile floor in your bathroom. Why? Because I've done one. And I can show you the evidence of my competency or lack thereof. It's not good. So, when you're in a workplace environment and you're trying to figure out, do I trust this person? Do I trust them with what? Because there are people that I trust at a high level. I would trust them to watch my kids. But I would not trust them with this microphone for 45 minutes on a Sunday morning to teach the Bible to you. No offense to it, but that's not their competency. Yeah. I have dear friends. I love them very, very much. I would trust them with my life in their hands. But I wouldn't trust them with that competency. What's also another factor in layers is calling. Is the spiritual gifts that someone has been graced by God with is a factor in the layers of trustworthiness. It's their calling. What are they called to do? Maybe you're trying to get someone to do something that is not what it is that they're called to do. It's not that you can't trust them at a high level. You're just trusting them with the wrong layer. And the last thing that's really, really specific, involves chemistry. Chemistry. And I would submit to you, this involves the finest of details, of the finest of being aligned around the details. Who do you need to have trust with that deep at that layer? You need to have that kind of chemistry with, for sure, if you're dating someone, you do not want to get married to someone just because you could trust them at a high level. They've got great character, but you don't trust them at the layer of chemistry. If we're aligned on the details of life, We're aligned in what it is that we want to pursue in life. Where else does chemistry come into play? If you're a leader in a workplace environment, you want for people to be able to understand alignment surrounding certain details of what it is that exists. Trust has levels and layers. Make sense? No. Didn't make sense at all. Okay, we'll try again in the 11:15. Come back. We'll walk through it again. I can't promise you I can save you a seat, but hopefully it will work. Okay. Trust has levels and it has layers. Now, it is important who we trust and in what manner. Right? It is. You know this. You've been hurt by people that were not trustworthy. You have had very rich relationships with people who were not perfect, but they were trustworthy at a certain level and with important layers to your life. Who you trust is so important. Why? Because there is a connection between trust and blessing. There is a connection between trust and blessing. There's a connection between who you trust and how you trust and you living a blessed life, an enjoyable life, a life to the full, the life that you have wanted to live and experience. There is a connection between trust and blessing. How do I know? I'm so glad that you ask. You're so curious as a congregation. Here's how I know. It's Psalm 1. This is how the Psalms lead off in the scriptures, is blessed is the one, or happy, enjoying their life is the person who what? Who does not walk in step with the wicked, who does not walk in step with the morally wrong. What does this mean? You're not associating yourself with the advice of the wicked. You're not taking advice from the wrong people. That's a key to a happy life. If you're taking advice for people who are wicked, who are morally wrong, who are guilty before God, and you're taking their advice, friends, it leads you to no place good. It says, blessed is the one who does not walk in the step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take. Sinners are those who are in a willful pattern of sinful disobedience to God. He says, don't stand with them. Don't become more involved with them to where you begin to take on this same pattern and way of life, or sit in the company of mockers. Those who just openly oppose and mock God. It's like, don't identify yourself with them. Don't identify your life with them. This is the opposite way of a life that is blessed. Instead, blessed is the one whose delight is in the law of the Lord and who meditates on his law day and night. What is that person like? Come on, a person who loves the word of God, who gets it into their heart and their soul and their mind at such a deep level that they can think about it and think through it and apply it day and night. It says that person is like a person that's a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. It's like, that's the person that you want to be, and those are the people that you want to be surrounded by. Not so with the wicked. They're like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord, look at this, watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. It says, if you choose God's will, God's way, God's word, it will protect you from trusting the wrong people. It will protect you and even help you rise above seasons in which you have trusted the wrong people. It says, I will protect those. I will watch over the way of the righteous. So what I've come to realize, and then I'm going to close this. What I've come to realize is that inside of every single person, there is this longing and a desire to be able to trust someone at the highest level and with every layer of life. Is it there? Is it inside of every one of us? Come on, in all of our disappointments, with all of our relationships, and all of the stress and all of the turmoil, there is this need for someone who's at the highest level and who gets every layer of the complexity of my life. I'm so thankful for what Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5 reminds us, that we can trust in the Lord with all your heart. Why? Because he's at the highest level. Come on, there is one who is at the highest level. It's not me and it's not you. And when we begin to trust him at the highest level and lean not on our own understanding, watch what happens. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. If you trust him, the only one who is able to be trustworthy at the highest level, he puts us in a position to where we have a path forward, where we have a path to be able to step into our future, where we actually begin to have clarity around who I trust and how I trust and in what manner in which I trust. Well, there is one who you can actually hand your entire life to at the highest level. What I realize is there's a lot of us who are stuck in a place of leaning on our own understanding, and it keeps bringing us to a place of devastation in our relationships. In fact, I'm going to do a ridiculous illustration right now. A ridiculous illustration to be able to illustrate the pain and the unsteadiness that many of us feel because of the lean. This is how many of you are living. Leaning on your own understanding and wondering why my life feels so unstable, why it feels shaky, why I feel like every relationship keeps ending up in the same state and the same status over and over again. You're wondering why you're so stressed. You're stressed because of the lean. You've been leaning on you, and you've been leaning on people who are not trustworthy with your life or any of the layers that are within it. You feel the stress and the pain and the turmoil of the shaky ground that you are in. But I wonder today if there's anybody who's ready to stop the lean, and trust somebody at the highest level, somebody who can actually hold you, somebody who can actually raise you. In fact, his name is resurrection in life. His name is Jesus, and he loves you when you're down. He loves you at your lowest. And what does he do? He lifts you so you can be planted on solid ground at a solid level. Come on, I wonder if anybody today has had him lift you up, and you know the one that you can trust at the highest level and with every layer of your life, that you've saw him. He heard you, he answered you, and he is the one who's bringing you through. Come on, let's begin to sing.